For 10 years, Dr. Aris Thorne had curated her life like one of the Renaissance masterpieces she'd once studied. Beautiful, balanced, and deceptively fragile. She had traded her academic career for the role of a philanthropist's wife, a mother, and the silent architect of her husband, Julian's success. Tonight, at the Thorne Development Group's annual foundation gala, she held a secret close to her heart. A tiny new life that she believed would finally bridge the growing chasm between them. But across the marble-floored ballroom, Julian was walking toward her, his hand possessively on the arm of a younger woman. Iris didn't know it yet, but her carefully constructed world was about to be shattered, and in the wreckage, she would have to decide whether to grieve what was lost or to finally unleash the woman she had buried long ago. A woman armed with secrets of her own. The scent of Casablanca lilies and quiet ambition filled the private dining room of the Pinnacle Club, a space Julian Thorne had designed to feel like sitting inside a jewel box suspended over the city. From 60 floors up, the lights of downtown glittered like a fallen constellation. Dr. Aris Thorne, her hand resting instinctively on the slight, still-hidden curve of her stomach, supervised the final touches. At 42, she possessed a calm, observant stillness that people often mistook for submission. Her midnight blue gown was a testament to her style, elegant, understated, and concealing. It hid the secret she planned to reveal over dessert, their third child. A new beginning she prayed Julian still wanted. "The lighting, Mrs. Thorne?" the manager asked, his deference absolute. "A touch warmer. Please, Michael," Aris replied, her voice soft but clear. "My husband finds stark lighting interrogating." Everything for Julian's comfort, she thought. A familiar, bittersweet pang echoing in her chest. For 15 years, her life had been a masterclass in anticipating his needs. She knew he preferred his steak medium rare with a peppercorn crust, his Bordeaux decanted for precisely 1 hour, and his adoring family arranged around him like a perfect portrait of success. Her 17-year-old twins, Liam and Maya, entered the room. Maya, inheriting her father's sharp confidence and her mother's fierce loyalty, kissed Aris's cheek. "It looks perfect, Mom, as always." Liam, quieter and more introspective, gave her a knowing look. "Is Dad actually going to be on time tonight?" "He has a last-minute meeting," Aris said, the excuse tasting like ash on her tongue. The last-minute meetings had become more frequent over the past year, stretching late into the night, leaving behind the faint, unfamiliar scent of a perfume that wasn't hers. She'd chosen to ignore it, attributing her suspicion to hormones and a quiet sense of loneliness. A baby, she'd told herself, would fix this. A new project for them to share. "A meeting," Maya scoffed under her breath, straightening a silver fork with unnecessary precision. She'd stopped believing her father's excuses months ago. Just then, Isabel Thorne swept in, a formidable presence at 75. A retired judge with a mind as sharp as a shard of glass, Julian's mother surveyed the room with an eagle's eye. "Aris Lovely. Let me guess. My son is making his grand entrance fashionably late?" "He's ensuring everything is perfect for the Foundation's benefactors," Aris replied smoothly, the lie polished from years of practice. Isabel's gaze softened as it landed on Oris. A flicker of something. Pity, perhaps, or a shared, unspoken understanding in her eyes. "You are a far more patient woman than I ever was, my dear." "Arthur," she said, invoking her late husband's name like a prayer, was never late. He believed punctuality was the foundation of respect. She leaned closer. "And you, Aris, deserve respect." The words hung in the air as the guests began to arrive. Board members, city officials, and the quiet, old-money families that formed the backbone of the Thorne Foundation. Aris greeted each one with effortless grace, remembering their children's names, their latest charitable cause, their dietary restrictions. She was the perfect hostess, the consummate corporate wife, moving through the glittering crowd while feeling utterly invisible. By 7:30 p.m., everyone was seated, except for the man at the head of the table. A nervous energy began to ripple through the room. At 7:45, the heavy oak doors swung open. Julian Thorne had arrived. He was 45, handsome in a way that seemed both earned and effortless, his tailored suit radiating power. But the collective intake of breath wasn't for him. It was for the woman on his arm. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with a striking auburn bob and an intelligent, anxious spark in her eyes. Her emerald green dress was tasteful but unforgiving, clinging to a figure that was unmistakably, elegantly pregnant. Perhaps 5 months along, Julian's voice, practiced and confident, boomed through the sudden silence. "Good evening, everyone. My apologies for the delay. I wanted to bring someone special. This is Chloe Reed, our lead designer on the new Dubai project." He paused, his eyes scanning the room before landing, with chilling deliberation on his wife. A cruel, triumphant smile played on his lips. "She's also the mother of my next child, the future of the Thorne legacy." The silence that followed was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. Every eye in the room darted from Julian to the pregnant woman, and finally to Aris. Maya's hand clenched into a fist on the white linen tablecloth. Liam looked as if he'd been struck. Isabel's face became an unreadable mask of stone. This was it. The moment she had dreaded in her darkest, most private fears. The vague suspicions, the late nights, the emotional distance. It all coalesced into this single, brutal act of public humiliation. Julian hadn't just been unfaithful. He had brought his betrayal to the heart of their family, dressed it in couture, and called it the future. He expected her to shatter, to weep, to flee. But as Aris looked at her husband's smug face, something inside her didn't break. It solidified. The years of quiet observation, of reading every contract before he signed it, of understanding the intricate financial web of his empire better than he did himself. It all rose to the surface. The grief was a tidal wave, but behind it was a bedrock of cold, hard clarity. Slowly, gracefully, she rose from her chair. The room held its breath. She walked the length of the table, her steps measured and calm. She didn't look at Julian. Her gaze was fixed on the young woman, Chloe, whose initial confidence had crumbled into visible distress. Aris extended a hand. "Welcome, Ms. Reed," she said, her voice impossibly steady, warm even. "We've reserved a place of honor for our special guests. Please come sit next to me." The shock in the room was palpable. Julian's triumphant smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. This wasn't in his script. He had anticipated a scene, tears, accusations, a dramatic exit that would paint him as the victim of a hysterical, aging wife. He had not anticipated hospitality. Chloe Reed, her face pale, hesitantly took Aris's offered hand. "Mrs. Thorne." Thank you." Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's Dr. Thorne," Aris corrected gently, a subtle but significant reclamation of the identity she had set aside. "But please, call me Aris." She guided the younger woman to the empty seat beside her own, a place traditionally held for the guest of honor. As Chloe sat, Aris turned to the frozen waitstaff. "We can begin service now, and Michael, please bring Mr. Thorne his usual Bordeaux." Her composure was a shield, flawless and impenetrable. As the first course, a delicate seared scallop on a bed of saffron risotto, was served, Aris initiated the conversation, her focus entirely on Chloe. Julian tells me you're the lead designer on the Dubai project. That's incredibly impressive. Your background is in sustainable architecture, isn't it? Surprised, Chloe nodded. Yes. I specialize in bioclimatic design for arid environments. We're hoping to create a structure that's not just iconic, but also has a minimal environmental footprint. As Aris posed thoughtful, intelligent questions, Chloe began to relax, speaking with passion and expertise about thermal massing and solar orientation. The board members at the table, initially avoiding eye contact, started to listen with genuine interest. Aris was masterfully reframing Chloe from a homewrecker into a brilliant corporate asset. Julian watched, a muscle tightening in his jaw. Aris was supposed to be the topic of conversation, her humiliation, her breakdown. Instead, she was conducting a business seminar. He tried to reclaim control. Chloe is brilliant. That's why I brought her into the firm. Her vision is what will make Thorn Development a global leader. I agree, Aris said, turning her cool gaze to him for the first time. Vision is paramount. Which brings me to an interesting point. You mentioned a future legacy, Julian. I'm curious how you envision that legacy, including our children, Liam and Maya. The question landed like a stone in a silent pond. The pretense of a normal dinner party evaporated. Maya looked at her father, her eyes blazing with a fury her mother kept expertly concealed. Yes, Dad, we'd love to know where we fit in next to your new son. Julian cleared his throat, flustered. Obviously, this is a complex situation. It's something your mother and I will discuss privately. I think we're past the point of private discussions, don't you? Aris's voice was still soft, but now it held an edge of steel. You've made this a public matter, so let's be public. You plan to divorce me, I assume. The lawyers have papers drawn up, he admitted, trying to sound firm but coming across as defensive. The settlement is incredibly generous. Generous, Aris mused, taking a slow sip of water. And what about the company, the Thorn Foundation? My seat on the board? Or will Ms. Reed be taking my place there as well, as the mother of the heir? Chloe shrank in her seat. Dr. Thorn, I never intended— I know you didn't, Chloe, Aris said, her tone softening as she spoke to her. This isn't about you. This is about a man who makes plans without considering all the variables. She turned back to her husband, her eyes locking onto his. Before we discuss the terms of my departure, Julian, perhaps we should discuss the terms of your leadership. Isabel Thorn, who had been watching the exchange with the stoic focus of a judge, finally spoke. An excellent point, Aris. Julian, your father was always very specific about leadership. It was never just about blood. It was about character. My character has built this company into an empire, Julian retorted, his voice rising. Has it? Aris asked quietly. She reached down for the leather portfolio that had been resting by her feet all evening, a portfolio everyone had assumed contained notes for a speech. She placed it on the table with a soft, definitive thud. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your character is about to dismantle it. She didn't need to raise her voice. The quiet click of the portfolio's latches was louder than any shout. The power in the room, which had been his by default for so long, was now flowing, inexorably, to her side of the table. Julian stared at the portfolio, a dawning horror in his eyes. He finally seemed to understand. He hadn't just walked into a dinner party. He had walked into a deposition, and his wife, the quiet academic he had so thoroughly underestimated, was the prosecution. Aris opened the portfolio, her movements deliberate and precise. The hushed whispers around the table ceased. Inside were not speech notes, but several bound documents, their edges marked with colored tabs. She slid the top one across the polished mahogany toward Harold Vance, the chairman of the board and an old friend of her late father-in-law. "Harold," she said, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. "You might recognize this. It's a copy of the founding charter for the Thorne Legacy Trust, which my father-in-law Arthur Thorne established upon his retirement." Julian scoffed, a desperate, hollow sound. "Ancient history, Aris. My father left me his controlling interest. Everyone knows that." "Not exactly," Aris countered, her gaze unwavering. "Arthur was a brilliant man, but he wasn't a sentimental one. He saw your ambition, Julian. He also saw your recklessness." She turned her attention back to the board members. "The trust holds 51% of the voting shares of Thorne Development Group. Arthur didn't leave control to his son. He left it to his son's partnership. The charter explicitly states that the shares are to be voted by 2 co-trustees, the acting CEO and his spouse, provided the marriage is intact and she is the mother of his children." A collective gasp went through the room. Isabel Thorne allowed herself a small, grim smile. She had witnessed the signing of that document. That's a ceremonial clause," Julian sputtered, his face draining of color. "You've never attended a shareholder meeting in your life." "Publicly, no," Aris corrected him. "That was our arrangement. You loved the spotlight. But for 15 years, every proxy vote, every major acquisition, every strategic decision required 2 signatures. Check the records, Harold. You'll find my signature, neat and clear, right next to Julian's on every single document." Harold Vance fumbled with the document, his reading glasses slipping down his nose. His face went pale. "She's right," he murmured, his voice thick with disbelief. "It's all here, legally airtight." The power shift was complete. Aris was not just a wronged wife. She was the silent gatekeeper of the entire Thorne empire. "But that's not why we're here tonight," she continued, her voice dropping to a serious, confidential tone. "This isn't about a marital dispute. It's about a breach of fiduciary duty." She pulled a second, thicker document from the portfolio and passed it down the table. "This is a forensic accounting report I commissioned 3 months ago." Julian shot to his feet. "You went behind my back? You hired accountants?" "I did," Aris said calmly, "when I noticed certain irregularities. Large capital transfers being moved from the company's primary accounts to a series of newly formed subsidiary LLCs, specifically to Thorne Future Holdings, based in Dubai." She looked directly at Chloe, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of confusion and horror. "The Dubai project, Chloe. The one you've been working on so passionately. Did Julian tell you it was being funded as a separate entity, with him as the sole proprietor?" "No," Chloe whispered, shaking her head. "He said it was the company's flagship international expansion." "It was supposed to be," Aris confirmed, her tone softening with a sliver of sympathy for the younger woman. "Instead, Julian has systematically funneled over $90 million of Thorne development assets into a personal venture. He wasn't expanding the company. He was creating a lifeboat, funded by the family business he intended to scuttle. The accusation, cold and backed by the damning evidence now being passed around the table, sucked the remaining air out of the room. This was no longer just infidelity. This was embezzlement on a massive scale. "This is a lie! A conspiracy!" Julian roared, his composure finally shattering. He pointed a trembling finger at his wife. "She's a scorned woman, trying to destroy me." "Is she, Julian?" Isabel's voice cut through his tirade like a blade. "I warned you. I warned you. Your father saw you more clearly than you saw yourself. He built this company to provide for his family for generations, not to fund your midlife crisis." She stood up, her regal bearing unassailable. "As a member of this board and the widow of its founder, I move for an immediate emergency vote. We must suspend Julian Thorne as CEO, pending a full, independent audit of these allegations. Harold Vance, looking at the numbers in the report, nodded grimly. "I second the motion." Julian stared around the room, his eyes pleading. But he found no allies. He had alienated them all with his arrogance, his lies, and now his blatant theft. He looked from the stony faces of his board members to the heartbroken fury in his daughter's eyes, the quiet disappointment in his son's, and the profound sorrow on his mother's face. Finally, his gaze fell on Oris. She wasn't smiling in triumph. Her expression was one of deep, weary sadness. In her eyes, he saw not just the end of their marriage, but the end of his reign. The papers in her portfolio weren't just legal documents. They were the final pages of the life he had known, a life he had single-handedly, foolishly set on fire. And in her quiet, unwavering strength, he finally saw the woman he had married, the woman he had lost long before he ever met Chloe Reed. The 24 hours that followed the dinner were a blur of controlled chaos. The board voted unanimously to suspend Julian, effective immediately. The motion was carried out with the cold, swift efficiency of a corporate execution. Julian was escorted from the building he had once ruled, his personal effects to be packed and sent to him. He left not with a roar of defiance, but with the stunned silence of a man who had lost a war he didn't even know he was fighting. Aris didn't go home. She went to the company's empty headquarters, the city lights painting long shadows across the CEO's office, her office for now. Isabel, Liam, and Maya joined her, a silent, protective circle around a woman who looked as though she were holding the world together by sheer force of will. "Are you okay, Mum?" Liam asked, his voice gentle. Aris finally let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for a year. "I don't know what I am, Liam, but I will be." The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was beginning to fade, leaving behind a deep, aching exhaustion. The secret she had carried, the tiny life inside her, felt both heavier and more precious than ever. This was no longer just about saving a legacy for her children. It was about building a world safe enough for the new one to be born into. The next morning, the financial crisis Julian had created became terrifyingly clear. He had leveraged company assets to the hilt, securing loans for his Dubai shell corporation that now threatened the stability of the entire Thorn Development Group. Oris, alongside Harold Vance and the company's legal counsel, spent the day in marathon meetings, untangling the web of deceit. She was surprisingly adept. The years she'd spent reading Julian's reports, questioning his assumptions, and studying market trends had not been wasted. She was not just a doctor of art history. She was a student of her husband's empire, and it turned out she had been the more diligent pupil. Late that afternoon, her assistant buzzed her. "Dr. Thorne, a Ms. Chloe Reed is here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." Aris felt a wave of weariness wash over her, but she straightened her shoulders. "Send her in." Chloe entered the office tentatively, her confident designer's poise gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability. She wasn't wearing an elegant dress now, but simple maternity jeans and a sweater. She clutched her handbag like a shield. "I don't expect you to believe me," Chloe began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I had no idea about any of this. The finances, the shell companies. He told me we were building something together. Something for..." Her hand went to her stomach. "For our son." Aris studied her for a long moment. She saw not a villain, but another woman who had been deceived by Julian's charismatic ambition. A woman who was now alone, pregnant, and tied to a scandal she didn't create. "I believe you," Aris said simply. The words hung in the air, an unexpected act of grace. Julian is very convincing when he's selling a dream. The problem is, he always puts himself at the center of it. Tears welled in Chloe's eyes. What am I going to do? I've resigned from the company. My name is linked to this mess. I have nothing. Here was the true test. Aris could have been vindictive. She could have enjoyed this woman's despair. But looking at Chloe, all she saw were the consequences of Julian's actions, consequences that would affect two innocent children. You won't have nothing, Aris said, her voice firm but kind. Your child is Julian's son. That makes him my children's half-brother. Family, however complicated, is still family. The Thorne Foundation has provisions for all of Arthur Thorne's descendants. Your son will be cared for. That is my promise to you, she went on, a plan forming in her mind. And as for you, your professional reputation is stellar. The Dubai project was built on your designs, your vision. Thorne Development will not be proceeding with it, but your work has value. I will personally recommend you to a colleague at a competing firm, someone who values talent over gossip. You can start over. Somewhere new. Chloe stared at her, speechless. Why? Why would you help me? I'm the woman who... You are the mother of a child who will share a bloodline with my children, Aris finished for her. This isn't about us. It's about them. They deserve a world with less conflict, not more. Julian created this wreckage. The least we can do is try to build something decent from the pieces. It was not forgiveness. It was something more profound, a recognition of shared responsibility for the future, a future that had been thrust upon them both. As Chloe left the office, a single tear of gratitude rolling down her cheek, Aris felt the first, fragile sense of peace she had known in months. She had not only survived the storm, she was now directing the currents. Stripped of his title, his access cards deactivated, Julian Thorne found himself in a world that no longer recognized him. He was a king in exile, banished from his own kingdom. His first reaction was pure, undiluted rage. He called his lawyers, demanding they sue Aris, the board, everyone. He would burn the company to the ground before he let her have it. His lawyer, a seasoned corporate litigator named Ben Carter, was blunt. Julian, you don't have a case. You have a series of documents with your signature on them, authorizing the transfer of $90 million to a company you privately own. The trust clause is ironclad. Aris has you cold. If you fight this, she won't just win. She'll be forced to file criminal charges to protect the shareholders. You'll go to prison. The word prison finally broke through his fury, leaving a chilling void in its wake. He retreated to his empty penthouse, the minimalist white space now feeling like a sterile, lonely prison of its own. He tried calling Chloe. Her number was disconnected. He learned from a former colleague that she had resigned and was rumored to be taking a job in Chicago. She had vanished from his life as quickly as she had entered it, taking with her the dream of a new dynasty he had so arrogantly proclaimed. Days bled into weeks. The initial fury curdled into a bitter, gnawing shame. He drank too much, slept too little. In the dead of night, the ghosts of his father's words would come back to him. He remembered a conversation years ago, shortly after he'd taken over as CEO. They were in his father's study, a room filled with the scent of old leather and accomplishment. Arthur Thorne, his health failing but his mind still sharp, had looked at his son with a penetrating gaze. "You're brilliant, Julian," Arthur had said, swirling the amber liquid in his brandy snifter. "You see the angles, the opportunities, but you lack an anchor. Your ambition is a magnificent ship, but without an anchor, it will be dashed on the rocks in the first real storm. My anchor is this company, this family," Julian had replied confidently. "No," Arthur had said, shaking his head. Those are the things you acquire. An anchor is what you are. It's your character, your integrity. He had paused, looking at a photo on his desk of Oris and a young Liam and Maya. That woman, Aris, she's your anchor. Don't you ever mistake her quiet for weakness. Her roots run deeper than yours ever will. If you lose her, you lose yourself. At the time, he'd dismissed it as the ramblings of an old man. Now, the words haunted him. He had cut the rope to his anchor, and he was adrift in a storm of his own making. One afternoon, Maya showed up at his door. She didn't knock, using her own key. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression a mirror of her grandmother's judicial steeliness. "Mom's in the hospital," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. Julian's heart seized. "What? Is she okay? The baby?" "She's fine, just precautionary. The stress of cleaning up your colossal mess is causing her blood pressure to spike. The doctors want her on bed rest for the last 2 months of her pregnancy." Maya's eyes narrowed. "She's running a multi-billion-dollar company from a hospital bed because you couldn't keep it in your pants and your hand out of the corporate cookie jar." The brutal honesty of his teenage daughter hit him harder than any lawyer's warning. "I want to see her," he said, his voice raw. "Why?" Maya shot back. "So you can apologize. So you can make yourself feel better. This isn't about you anymore, Dad. Nothing is. Mum is having a baby, a little brother or sister for us. Chloe Reed is in Chicago, about to have a baby, a half-brother. These are the only things that matter now. And you are the one thing that puts it all at risk." She left as abruptly as she had arrived. Julian sank onto his designer sofa, the expensive leather cold and unforgiving. His daughter was right. His apologies were worthless. He had broken everything he had ever touched. His marriage, his company, his father's trust, the hearts of his children. For the first time in his life, Julian Thorne looked in the mirror and didn't see a titan of industry. He saw a failure, a man who had lost everything, because he had never truly understood what was worth keeping. The descent was complete. Now, he had to decide if there was any way back up. Aris ran Thorne Development from room 712 of the maternity ward at Lenox Hill Hospital, propped up against a mountain of pillows, with a fetal heart monitor strapped to her belly and a laptop perched on her legs. She commanded her empire with a quiet, unyielding focus. The board had officially named her interim CEO, and the financial world, initially skeptical, was now impressed. She had successfully renegotiated the company's debt, stabilized their stock price, and projected a calm confidence that was the polar opposite of Julian's reckless swagger. Her days were a blur of conference calls, legal briefings, and non-stress tests. Isabel was a constant presence, managing the flow of information and visitors, while Liam and Maya took turns reading to her, or just sitting in companionable silence. They were a family forged anew in crisis, their bonds stronger than ever. One afternoon, Isabel brought her a letter that had arrived by courier. The return address was from a law firm in Chicago. It was from Chloe Reed. Aris opened it with a sense of trepidation. The letter wasn't accusatory or demanding. It was a formal, yet personal, request to open a line of communication regarding her unborn son. Chloe wrote that she had secured a good position at a prestigious architectural firm and was financially stable. But she felt a moral obligation to ensure her child had some connection to his paternal family, if they were willing. She wasn't asking for money, but for a plan. Aris read the letter twice. This was the moment where the future would be defined. She could ignore it, letting Julian handle his own mess. Or she could step in and shape the outcome herself. She knew what her father-in-law, Arthur, would have wanted. Legacy wasn't just about money. It was about people. She asked Isabel to arrange a video call. A few days later, the faces of the two women who shared a profound and painful connection to the same man appeared on Aris's screen. Chloe looked tired but determined. Aris, in her hospital gown, looked regal. "Thank you for agreeing to this, Aris," Chloe began, forgoing her lawyer who sat just off camera. "I want to do what's best for my son. That's the only thing we should be focused on," Aris agreed. "Tell me what you have in mind." What followed was not a tense negotiation, but a surprisingly practical conversation. They talked about names, about medical history from the Thorne side of the family, about visitation. Chloe was clear she wanted her son to grow up in Chicago, away from the New York society pages. Aris understood completely. "My children," Aris said, her hand resting on her own swollen belly, "will have 2 half-brothers. One living with me, and one living with you. I want them to know each other. Not as strangers or rivals, but as family. It will be complicated, but it's not impossible. We can arrange for visits during holidays, once everyone is old enough to understand." "And Julian?" Chloe asked, the name hanging awkwardly between them. "Julian will have to earn his place in both of his sons' lives," Aris stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "He will have rights, but his involvement will be conditional on his stability and his respect for the boundaries we set. We, Chloe, will be the ones setting the terms. Together." It was a radical proposal. 2 mothers, united by one man's betrayal, forming a matriarchal alliance to protect their children from his chaos. Chloe looked visibly moved, a weight seeming to lift from her shoulders. "Okay," she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. "Okay, Aris. Together." Just as they were ending the call, a nurse came in. "Dr. Thorne, your ex-husband is in the waiting room. He's been asking to see you for the past 3 days. Should I continue to send him away?" Aris paused. She looked at Chloe's face on the screen, a partner in this strange new reality. She thought of Julian, the broken man Maya had described. Pity was a useless emotion, but the concept of second chances, of redemption, was not. Perhaps it was time. "No," Aris said, her voice clear and resolved. "Let him in." She disconnected the call with Chloe, took a deep breath, and prepared for the next battle. Or perhaps for the first time, a truce. Julian entered the hospital room, looking like a stranger. The impeccably tailored suit was gone, replaced by simple slacks and a worn sweater. He had lost weight, and the arrogant fire in his eyes had been replaced by a deep, hollowed-out weariness. He held a small, clumsy-looking bouquet of daisies, as if he'd bought them from a street cart. They were so different from the extravagant orchids he used to send. They were humble. He stopped a few feet from her bed, looking utterly lost. "Maya told me about your blood pressure. I'm sorry." "Thank you," Aris said, her tone neutral. She gestured to the uncomfortable visitor's chair. "Sit down, Julian." He sat, perching on the edge, as if he didn't deserve the comfort. For several minutes, silence filled the room, broken only by the steady, rhythmic beat of their unborn child's heart on the monitor. It was the sound of the future he had almost destroyed. "I didn't come here to ask for forgiveness," he finally said, his voice raspy. "I know I don't deserve it, and I'm not here to ask for my job back. I know that's gone." He looked at his hands. "I've been seeing a therapist, talking about everything, about my father, about my need to always be winning, even if it meant everyone else had to lose." He finally lifted his gaze to meet hers. "I lost, Aris. I know that. I lost you a long time ago. I lost my father's respect before he even died, and I almost lost my children." He took a shaky breath. I'm here to ask, not to be your husband, but to be a father, to Liam and Maya, and to this baby." His eyes flickered to her stomach. "And to the baby in Chicago. I want to be a father to all of them, if you'll let me." This was the man she hadn't seen in a decade. The vulnerability, the honesty, the stripping away of all pretense. The anger she had held on to for so long began to soften, not into forgiveness, but into a pragmatic understanding. This broken man was still the father of her children. His redemption, or lack thereof, would shape their lives forever. "Being a father isn't a title you claim, Julian," she said quietly. "It's a job you do. Every day." "I know. I'm ready to do the work," he insisted. "Whatever it takes. Whatever your terms are." And so, in that sterile hospital room, they began the most difficult negotiation of their lives. It wasn't about assets or settlements. It was about bedtimes, school pickups, and holiday schedules. It was about how they would explain this to a 5-year-old one day. Eris laid out her terms, which were the same ones she had discussed with Chloe. He would have visitation, but she would have final say on all major decisions. He would be required to attend family counseling with Liam and Maya. He would set up a separate, legally binding trust for Chloe's son, managed by an independent third party, to ensure his financial support was never a weapon. He agreed to everything without hesitation. "There's one more thing," Aris said. "Thorn Development. It's a family company. Our children may want to be a part of it one day. So will Chloe's son. The legacy is theirs now, not yours or mine." She slid a document, brought by her lawyer earlier that day, across the bedside table. "This gives you a choice. You can take a standard severance package and walk away completely, or you can take a position heading a new, small-scale, charitable wing of the Thorn Foundation, focused on building low-income, sustainable housing. The salary is a fraction of what you're used to. You'll have no corporate power. You'll answer to a board that I oversee. But you'll be building homes. You'll be doing something for people other than yourself. It's a chance to build a different kind of legacy." He stared at the paper, then back at her, his eyes filled with a stunned, dawning respect. She wasn't just exiling him. She was offering him a path to redemption, a way to channel his ambition into something good. It was a lifeline, and he knew it. "I'll take it," he whispered, his voice cracking with an emotion she hadn't heard from him in years. Gratitude. "Thank you, Aris." In that moment, the bridge between their old life and their new one was built. It was fragile, scarred, and unconventional, but it was there. And for the first time, it felt strong enough to hold the weight of their complicated, messy, and redefined family. 2 years later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, a small group gathered at a newly opened park in a once-neglected corner of the city. The park was beautiful, with a state-of-the-art playground and community garden, all built on land, donated and developed by the Thorn Foundation. Aris Thorn, now the permanent and widely respected CEO of Thorn Development Group, watched as her 1-year-old daughter, Clara, took wobbly steps across the grass. Liam, now a freshman at Columbia, studying environmental science, was pushing his little sister on the swings. A few feet away, Julian was showing his son, a bright-eyed toddler named Theo, how to build a tower with wooden blocks. Chloe, in town for the weekend from Chicago, sat on the blanket with them, laughing as the tower inevitably tumbled. She and Aris exchanged a warm, easy smile. Their video calls had become a weekly ritual, a mix of co-parenting logistics and genuine friendship. Maya, home from her first year at Georgetown, sat beside her mother, sketching the scene in her notepad. "It's weird, isn't it?" she said quietly, not looking up. "That this feels normal now." "It's our normal," Aris replied, her heart full. We made it ourselves. Julian caught her eye from across the lawn and gave a small, appreciative nod. He was a different man. The charitable housing division he ran was a stunning success, and the work had changed him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet purpose. He was a present and engaged father to all three of his children. His relationship with Aris was one of polite, respectful co-parenting. The love was gone, but a deep, foundational respect had taken its place. Later, as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Isabel joined Aris on the bench. "Your father-in-law would be so proud, Aris," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Not just of what you did for the company, but of this." She gestured to the sprawling, unconventional family enjoying a simple Saturday in the park. He always said legacy wasn't about the buildings you leave behind, but the strength of the foundation you lay for the next generation. You saved it. You redefined it. Aris watched Julian gently help Theo up after a fall and saw Chloe pass Clara a teething toy. She saw Liam and Maya, no longer children of a broken home, but the confident, compassionate older siblings in a complex but loving family. She realized the power she'd wielded that night at the dinner party wasn't in the papers she held. The papers were just a tool. The real power had been her willingness to tear down a beautiful, hollow facade, to build something true and resilient in its place. She had lost a husband, but had found herself. And in doing so, she had given everyone, including the man who betrayed her, a second chance to build a legacy worthy of the Thorn name. This story is a reminder that our deepest betrayals can sometimes lead to our greatest strengths. True power isn't about revenge, but about the courage to rebuild. If Aris's journey from heartbreak to leadership resonated with you, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of her story moved you the most? Share this video with someone who might need a story of resilience and second chances. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, real-life stories about overcoming adversity and redefining what it means to be a family. What happens when a billionaire's cruel joke backfires in the most spectacular way imaginable? In the glittering heart of New York City, a single stain of red wine on a $1,000 suit ignites a firestorm of public humiliation. For Sebastian Sterling, the city's most arrogant tech mogul, it was a chance to make an example of a clumsy waitress. He offered her a challenge meant to break her, a mocking proposal in front of the city's elite, dance a perfect tango, and he would marry her. He expected tears. He expected failure. He never expected that the woman in the cheap apron was a queen in exile, and he had just handed her the keys to his kingdom and his heart. The air in the Serafina was thick with the scent of money and truffle oil. It was a place where conversations were conducted in hushed, confident tones, and the clinking of Cristofler's silverware against Bernardeau porcelain was the evening's primary soundtrack. For Celestine Rossi, it was just another Tuesday, another 12-hour shift on her feet, another night of smiling through the ache in her calves and the deeper ache in her soul. Her uniform, a starched black dress with a crisp white apron, felt like a costume from a life she was never meant to lead. It was neat, it was clean, but it was a cage. She moved between tables with a practiced grace, her steps economical and silent, a ghost refilling water glasses and clearing away the remnants of exorbitant meals. Her face was a mask of pleasant neutrality. Her dark eyes, which once held the fire of 1,000 spotlights, now carefully guarded and observant. Tonight, Table 12 was the center of the restaurant's universe. It was occupied by Sebastian Sterling and his entourage. Even if you didn't read the business pages, you knew him. His face was plastered on magazine covers and digital billboards across the city. The self-made titan of sterling innovations. A man who had disrupted the tech world with a blend of brutal genius and even more brutal ambition. He was handsome in a severe way, with sharp cheekbones, piercing grey eyes, and dark hair meticulously styled to look effortlessly windswept. He radiated an aura of impatience, as if the rest of the world was operating on a delay he couldn't afford. With him was his fiancée, Victoria Davenport, the daughter of an old-money real estate dynasty. She was everything Celestine was not: poised blonde and adorned in diamonds that glittered with cold ancestral light. She sipped her champagne and laughed a laugh that never quite reached her eyes. Celestine approached the table with a heavy bottle of Chateau Margaux, a wine that cost more than her monthly rent. Her mind was 1,000,000 miles away, calculating the copay for her father's next round of physical therapy, wondering if she could pick up an extra shift on Thursday. That momentary distraction was all it took. A busboy, young and nervous, pivoted too quickly behind her. Their shoulders brushed a minor collision in the grand scheme of things. But the angle was disastrous. Celestine's hand, steady for thousands of hours of service, faltered. The neck of the bottle tipped, and a splash of deep blood-red wine arched through the air, landing directly on the pristine white shirt and grey silk tie of Sebastian Sterling. The world stopped. The hushed chatter of the restaurant died instantly. Every eye swiveled to table 12. The silence was a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. Victoria Davenport gasped, a hand flying to her mouth in performative shock. "Oh my God!" Celestine felt the blood drain from her face. "Mr. Sterling, I am so incredibly sorry," she began, her voice trembling slightly as she reached for a napkin. Sebastian looked down at the crimson stain spreading across his chest like a fatal wound. He didn't move. He simply stared at it for a long, terrible moment. Then very slowly, he lifted his gaze to Celestine. His eyes were not angry. They were worse. They were cold, analytical, and filled with a profound, dismissive contempt. "Are you?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. "Are you sorry for your incompetence, or just for the fact that you've likely just ended your employment?" "It was an accident," Celestine whispered, her cheeks burning with shame. "The busboy, do not deflect blame," he cut her off, his voice rising just enough to carry. "A professional anticipates their surroundings. This shirt is custom-made. This tie is from Milan. Their value exceeds your annual salary. But the true cost is the disruption to my evening, an evening for which I am paying a small fortune." He stood up, dabbing at the stain with a napkin in a way that only made it worse. His friends, a pack of sycophantic junior partners and investors, watched with a mixture of pity for her and admiration for his display of power. "Please, sir." The restaurant manager, a flustered man named Mr. Dubois, scurried over. "The meal is on the house, of course. We will cover all dry cleaning expenses, all of them." Sebastian waved a dismissive hand, never taking his eyes off Celestine. She stood frozen, the heavy wine bottle still in her hand, feeling smaller and more insignificant than she ever had in her life. This was the nadir, the absolute bottom. The years of sacrifice, of swallowing her pride to pay for her father's care. All of it had led to this moment of public crucifixion over a spilled drink. "It's not about the money, Dubois," Sebastian said, a cruel smirk beginning to form on his lips. "It's about the principle. It's about—" Standards. He looked at Celestine from her worn-out black shoes to the stray wisp of dark hair that had escaped her tight bun. He saw a nobody, a clumsy, forgettable waitress in a city full of them. And in that moment, fueled by arrogance and the rapt attention of the room, he decided to turn her humiliation into his evening's entertainment. "You know," he said, his voice now theatrical, "I'm in a generous mood. I'm willing to overlook this catastrophic failure of motor skills on one condition." Every person in the room leaned in. Celestine just wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She could feel the stares, the whispers, the judgment. Sebastian's eyes drifted to the small, polished wooden square in the corner of the restaurant, a makeshift dance floor where a jazz trio was playing a quiet, melancholic tune. A wicked, brilliant idea sparked in his mind. It was perfect. It was condescending. It was utterly unforgettable. He turned back to Celestine, his smirk widening into a predatory grin. "I'm sure you're a woman of many hidden talents. Let's see one of them." Celestine just stared, confused and terrified. "Sir, don't be shy," he purred, the mockery dripping from every syllable. "A little performance, a little dance for our supper. What do you say?" He was toying with her, and everyone knew it. He was and she was the mouse he had cornered, and he was determined to enjoy the kill. The jazz trio, sensing a shift in the room's atmosphere, trailed off into a confused silence. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the frantic beating of Celestine's own heart. Sebastian Sterling circled her slowly like a shark, inspecting its prey. "A dance," he repeated, savoring the words. "A simple dance, to prove you're more than just a pair of hands that can't hold a wine bottle." Victoria Davenport let out a little titter of laughter, which was echoed by the men at their table. "Oh, Sebastian, you're dreadful," she said, though her eyes shone with cruel amusement. Mr. Dubois looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. "Mr. Sterling, please, this is highly unorthodox. The young lady is being given a chance to redeem herself." Sebastian cut in smoothly, his gaze locked on Celestine. "A chance most people in her position only dream of. The undivided attention of everyone in this room." Celestine's throat was dry. She wanted to say no. She wanted to throw the wine bottle at his perfectly sculpted head, tear off her apron, and walk out with her head held high. But the image of her father flashed in her mind, his quiet strength, the way his medical bills piled up on the kitchen table, the hope in his eyes that she'd tried so hard not to extinguish. She needed this job. She couldn't afford a grand gesture of defiance. Her pride had been a luxury she'd surrendered long ago. I don't dance, sir." She mumbled the lie, tasting like ash in her mouth. Sebastian laughed, a sharp, barking sound devoid of humor. "Oh, I'm sure you can manage a little shuffle. Everyone can." He gestured to the dance floor. "But let's not make it too easy." His eyes scanned the room, and a glint of inspiration or perhaps malevolence lit them up. He walked over to the jazz trio's abandoned speaker, pulled out his phone, and connected it to the Bluetooth system with the ease of a man who owned the world and all the technology in it. He scrolled for a moment, a thoughtful, predatory look on his face. Then he found what he was looking for. The opening notes that filled the silent restaurant were unmistakable. Not the gentle swing of the jazz trio, but the dramatic, heart-wrenching sob of a bandoneon. It was the sound of Buenos Aires, of late-night milongas, of passion and despair. It was tango, and not just any tango. It was La Comparsita, in its most complex and dramatic orchestral arrangement. The tango of tangos. A dance that professionals spent a lifetime attempting to master. Celestine froze. The music was a ghost, a phantom limb she hadn't felt in years. Each note was a memory, a scar. The scent of her partner's cologne, the feel of the hardwood floor beneath her worn tango shoes, the weight of a gold medal around her neck, the crushing disappointment of a dream destroyed. It all came rushing back, a tidal wave of pain and longing. Sebastian walked back to her, his phone held aloft like a scepter. His voice was a triumphant, mocking roar that filled the cavernous room. "There," he declared, "a proper challenge. The tango. A dance of passion, precision, and control. Qualities you seem to be lacking." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was still audible to the nearest tables. "I'll tell you what. I'll make you a proposition, a truly once-in-a-lifetime offer." He straightened up, ensuring he had everyone's attention. He was a showman, a ringmaster in his own private circus of cruelty. "Forget the dry cleaning bill. Forget your job," he announced grandly. "You dance this tango right here, right now, and you dance it perfectly. And I'll do more than forgive you." He paused for dramatic effect, a wolfish grin spreading across his face. "I'll marry you." The room erupted, not in gasps of shock, but in peals of laughter. It was the most absurd, most insulting, most theatrical proposition imaginable. The billionaire and the waitress. A fairy tale twisted into a public mockery. Victoria laughed, the hardest dabbing at her eyes, as if he'd just told the cleverest joke in the world. "Marry me." Celestine finally found her voice, a whisper of disbelief. "A figure of speech, of course," Sebastian said, with a condescending wink to his friends. "A grand prize for a grand performance. But let's be realistic. There is no one in this city, let alone this room, let alone in that uniform, who could do justice to that music. It's an impossible task." He crossed his arms, the picture of smug satisfaction. The challenge was laid. The humiliation was complete. He expected her to crumble, to burst into tears and flee the room, providing the perfect end to his little power play. He had boxed her in, stripped her of her dignity, and made her the punchline of a joke she would never forget. For a long moment, Celestine stood motionless. The music swirled around her, a lament of strings and the rhythmic pulse of the piano. The laughter of the crowd echoed in her ears. She looked at Sebastian Sterling's mocking face, at Victoria's smug superiority, at the sea of expectant eyes, all waiting for her to break. Something inside her, a pilot light she thought had been extinguished years ago, flickered. It grew into a small, hot flame. It wasn't pride she felt, not anymore. It was rage. A pure, cold, clarifying rage. He thought this music was his weapon to humiliate her. He had no idea it was her sword and shield. He thought he was the ringmaster, but he had just walked into her arena. She looked directly into Sebastian's cold grey eyes. The fear and shame in her own had vanished, replaced by an intensity that made him momentarily falter. Slowly, deliberately, she began to untie the strings of her apron. "Fine," she said, her voice no longer a whisper, but clear and steady, cutting through the lingering laughter. She folded the apron neatly and placed it on a nearby tray. Then she kicked off her sensible, comfortable work shoes. The soft thud they made on the carpet was like a declaration. She stood before him in her simple black dress and stockinged feet. The posture of the weary waitress was gone. Her shoulders went back, her spine straightened, her chin lifted. In the space of 10 seconds, Celestine Rossi vanished, and someone else, someone formidable and terrifyingly alive, took her place. "You want a tango?" she said, her voice now laced with ice. "You'll get a tango, but you're going to be my partner." Sebastian's smirk wavered, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise. This was not part of the script. It's a partner dance," she stated, not asked. She held out a hand, her gesture an undeniable command. "Unless you're afraid." The entire restaurant held its breath. The challenge had been thrown back. The mouse was roaring at the lion. To refuse now would be to admit defeat, to show weakness in front of the very people he sought to impress. Trapped by his own hubris, Sebastian Sterling had no choice. With a look of stunned disbelief, he took her hand. The moment his fingers touched hers, a jolt like an electric current passed between them. Her hand was not the soft, timid thing he expected. It was strong, confident, and impossibly sure. Celestine pulled him not gently toward the polished wooden floor. She turned to the band leader. "Restart the track," she commanded, "from the top." The first mournful notes of La Comparsita filled the room again. But this time the silence wasn't born of shock. It was electric with anticipation. As Celestine led Sebastian to the center of the floor, a transformation occurred that was so profound it seemed like a trick of the light. The slouch of the waitress, born from hours of fatigue, vanished. Her spine became a rod of steel, her shoulders set in a posture of regal command. She lifted her chin, and the guarded, weary look in her eyes was replaced by a smoldering fire. The simple black work dress no longer looked like a uniform. It looked like a deliberate minimalist costume, accentuating the clean, powerful lines of her body. Sebastian, accustomed to leading in every aspect of his life, found the dynamic instantly and shockingly reversed. Her grip on his hand and her hand on his back were not suggestions. They were instructions, written in a language his body understood before his mind could process it. He was a competent social dancer, taught the requisite steps for charity balls and high society functions. He knew how to lead a waltz, how to navigate a foxtrot. He knew nothing of this. This was not a dance. It was a declaration of war. For the opening bars, she held them in the abrazo, the traditional tango embrace, but hers was different. It was firm, dominant. She held his gaze, and in her dark eyes, he saw not a waitress, but a predator. He saw a story he couldn't begin to read. Then she moved. It began with the caminata, the tango walk. But her walk was not a simple step. It was a panther's prowl, her feet brushing the floor with a deadly grace, her hips swaying with a controlled hypnotic rhythm. She guided him backward, forcing him to follow her lead, his mind reeling. He had intended to embarrass her. Instead, he was a puppet, and she was the master pulling his strings. As the music swelled, her movements grew more complex. She executed a flawless ocho, her legs scissoring through the air with a speed and precision that defied belief. Her body was a blur of controlled energy, each movement flowing seamlessly into the next. She wasn't just performing steps. She was interpreting the music, embodying the soul of the tango, its passion, its melancholy, its fierce, defiant pride. The crowd was mesmerized. The whispers had stopped. The smirks had been wiped from every face, replaced by slack-jawed awe. Victoria Davenport's smile was frozen, a brittle mask of disbelief. This was not possible. The clumsy girl who had spilled wine was dancing with the skill of a world-class professional. Celestine pulled Sebastian into a series of gyros, spinning him around her as she remained the unshakable axis of their shared world. He struggled to keep up his social dancing skills, utterly inadequate for the storm he had unleashed. She was the one leading her subtle shifts in weight and pressure, communicating her intent a fraction of a second before she moved. She was 10 steps ahead of him, anticipating his every clumsy reaction and incorporating it into her choreography. At one point, in a breathtaking display of audacity, she dipped him. It was a shocking reversal of roles, a move of such dominance that a collective gasp rippled through the restaurant. She held him there, suspended inches from the floor. For a heart-stopping second, her leg wrapped around his in a perfect gancho. She stared down at him, and in that moment, he felt utterly powerless. He saw the culmination of thousands of hours of practice, of sweat, of tears, of a life he couldn't possibly comprehend. She was telling him without words, "You have no idea who I am." He was no longer Sebastian Sterling, the tech mogul. He was just a man completely out of his depth, held captive by a force of nature disguised as a waitress. He felt the heat of her body, smelled the faint scent of soap and starch, and saw the raw, untamed passion burning in her eyes. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. For the climax of the song, she broke their embrace, giving herself space. The floor became her stage. She performed a series of solo footwork combinations, her feet a blur of staccato taps and elegant sweeps, lapisbolio barrida. It was a language of its own, a story of a broken heart and an unbreakable spirit. The audience was no longer watching a dance. They were witnessing a soul laid bare. For the final crashing chord of the music, she launched herself back toward him. He braced himself, but instead of a collision, she melted into his arms, finishing in a dramatic pose. Her back arched her head, thrown back, one hand pressed against her heart. Her chest heaved with exertion, and her eyes, glittering with unshed tears and fiery defiance, were locked on his. For 3 eternal seconds, the restaurant was utterly silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then a single person began to clap, then another, and another. Within moments, the entire room, from the busboys hiding in the kitchen doorway to the wealthiest patrons, was on its feet, erupting in a deafening roar of applause and shouts of "Brava!" It was an ovation the Serafina had never seen. It wasn't polite society applause. It was thunderous, visceral, and raw. Sebastian stood, frozen, his arms still around Celestine, his mind a complete blank. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic rhythm that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the woman in his arms. The humiliation he had planned had turned into his own public humbling. He had mocked a master, challenged a queen in her own court, and he had been utterly, devastatingly defeated. Celestine gently extricated herself from his grasp. She ignored the applause, the shocked faces, the standing ovation. She gave one last, long look at Sebastian Sterling, a look that held a universe of meaning, contempt, triumph, pity, and a profound, heartbreaking sadness. Then, without a word, she turned her back on him on table 12, on the entourage stunned restaurant. She walked past the gawking Mr. Dubois, retrieved her worn shoes, and headed for the staff exit, never once looking back. She didn't need their applause. She didn't need his ridiculous proposal. She had taken back the only thing that mattered. She had taken back herself. The thunderous applause slowly faded as Celestine disappeared through the swinging kitchen doors, leaving a vacuum in the center of the room. The patrons slowly returned to their seats, but the atmosphere of quiet elegance was shattered. The air buzzed with excited, incredulous chatter. Everyone was talking about the waitress, the tango waitress. Sebastian Sterling remained standing on the dance floor, the wine stain on his shirt, a forgotten detail. He felt as though he'd been struck by lightning. The ghost of her touch, the intensity of her gaze, the sheer raw power of her performance, it replayed in his mind on a loop. Who was she? How was this possible? Sebastian, for God's sake, come and sit down. Everyone is staring. Victoria's voice was a sharp, icy hiss that cut through his daze. He looked over at her. Her face was a mask of fury. The amusement was gone, replaced by a deep personal humiliation. She hadn't been entertained. She had been upstaged. A nobody waitress had stolen the spotlight at her table with her fiancé and had become the star of an evening that was supposed to be about them. "Did you see that?" one of his associates, a man named Richard, said with a low whistle. "Where did she learn to dance like that?" "She must be a professional," another chimed in. "Some sort of performance artist." Sebastian ignored them. He walked back to the table, his movements stiff and robotic. He felt exposed, foolish. His clever, cruel game had blown up in his face in the most public way imaginable. He had tried to assert his power and had only succeeded in revealing hers. "That was quite a spectacle," Victoria said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I hope you're satisfied." Sebastian started, but he had no words. Satisfied. He was disoriented, shaken, and inexplicably intrigued. The spell was broken by the frantic tapping of a phone screen at a nearby table. A woman was excitedly showing her friend a video. "I got the whole thing. I'm posting it right now. #tango waitress #Serafina showdown." A knot of dread tightened in Sebastian's stomach. By the time he and his silent, furious fiancée were in their car, his phone was already buzzing incessantly. A news alert from a city gossip blog popped up. "Mysterious waitress stuns elite crowd with world-class tango at the Serafina." He clicked on it. The video was shaky, filmed from a table across the room, but it was unmistakably clear. The quality was poor, but the quality of the dancing was undeniable. It captured everything: his mocking challenge, her quiet acceptance, and the breathtaking 3-minute performance that had left everyone speechless. The comments were already flooding in. "OMG, who is she? She's incredible. That arrogant jerk in the suit is Sebastian Sterling. He deserved that. She didn't just dance. She owned him. I hope she sues him for harassment. That 'marry you' comment was disgusting. #find the tango waitress." The hashtag was spreading like wildfire. "This is a disaster," Victoria said from the other side of the car, her arms crossed tightly. "You made a complete fool of yourself, Sebastian, and of me." "I didn't know," he said, his voice flat. It was a weak defense, and he knew it. "That's the point. You never know, you just charge ahead assuming everyone is beneath you, that you can play with people's lives for your own amusement." She seethed. "Well, your little game just went viral. The board of my father's charity is meeting tomorrow. What do you think they'll be discussing over coffee?" Sebastian didn't answer. He was watching the video again, zooming in on Celestine's face. In the pixelated image, he could see the flicker of emotions, the initial pain, the hardening resolve, the fiery passion. He had looked at her and seen a disposable object. He had been spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. The next morning, it was a full-blown media storm. The video had millions of views. It was on every morning news show, every entertainment blog. The tango waitress was the #1 trending topic in the country. Reporters were camped outside the Serafina, trying to get a comment from the now-famous staff. Dubois, looking overwhelmed, simply stated that the employee had quit the previous night and left no forwarding information. At the headquarters of Sterling Innovations, Sebastian's PR team was in full crisis mode. "We need to get ahead of this, Seb," said David Chen, his chief operating officer, and one of his few real friends. "The narrative right now is billionaire bully gets rightfully humbled. It's not a good look. It makes you look cruel and out of touch." "I was cruel," Sebastian admitted, staring out his panoramic office window at the city below. He hadn't slept. "I was an arrogant ass." David raised an eyebrow. An admission of fault from Sebastian was rarer than a solar eclipse. "Okay, good start. So what do we do?" "We issue an apology. We say the proposal was a poor attempt at humor. We make a large donation to a charity for aspiring artists." "No," Sebastian said, turning from the window. "That's not enough. That's just damage control. That's plastic." "What are you thinking?" David asked, wary. "I need to find her," Sebastian said, a new unfamiliar determination in his voice. "I need to apologize to her. In person." "Are you crazy? Leave it alone. The story will die down in a few days," David argued. "Going after her will only make it worse. It'll look like you're harassing her again, trying to buy her silence." "I don't care how it looks," Sebastian insisted. "This isn't about P anymore. Did you watch the video, David? I mean, really watch it?" "That wasn't just a dance. That was something else. No one learns to dance like that, taking a few classes on the weekend. That's a lifetime of dedication. And she was serving tables at the Serafina. Why?" The question hung in the air. It was the question that had been gnawing at him all night. The disconnect was too vast. The talent was too immense to be hidden under a waitress's apron by choice. He had set out to expose a weakness, and had instead stumbled upon a profound mystery. And Sebastian Sterling, a man who had built his empire on solving complex problems and uncovering patterns others couldn't see, was now completely and utterly obsessed. "I don't just need to apologize," he said more to himself than to David. "I need to understand." He picked up his phone and buzzed his assistant. "Get me Nicholas Frost on the line, the private investigator. Tell him to clear his schedule. I have a job for him. I want him to find a ghost." While Sebastian Sterling was leveraging his immense resources to pierce the veil of her anonymity, Celestine Rossi was hiding. She'd fled her tiny apartment, taking refuge in the slightly larger, infinitely more cluttered apartment of her best friend and former co-worker, Chloe. Chloe's living room was a fortress of drawn blinds and silenced phones. The television was off, but the story was unavoidable. Every time they dared to check online, Celestine's face, captured in a grainy screenshot from the viral video, stared back at them. "You are officially more famous than that cat who plays the piano," Chloe announced, scrolling through her phone with a morbid fascination. "They're calling you the Tango Terminatrix. The comments are wild. 90% are on your side, calling you a hero. The other 10% are just proposals from strangers who are apparently into being publicly dominated." Celestine curled on the sofa in a borrowed sweatshirt, managed a weak smile. "I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I just detonated my entire life." "You didn't detonate it. You liberated it," Chloe corrected. "You quit that soul-crushing job in the most epic way possible. You should be proud." "I'm terrified, Chloe," Celestine confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "I have no job. My father's next treatment is in 3 weeks, and now my face is everywhere. What if a potential employer sees that they'll think I'm a troublemaker? Or they'll think you're a superstar who deserves better than serving soup to sociopaths," Chloe countered fiercely. "Look, there are already offers. This dance studio in Chelsea wants to offer you a position as their lead instructor. A theatre company in the village wants to audition you for their new show. A cruise line wants you to be their headline performer. Izzy, this is a chance, the chance you thought you'd lost. Celestine flinched at the word chance. It brought back too many memories. The scent of rosin, the feel of a perfectly balanced dance shoe, the echo of applause in a real theatre, and the face of her partner, the other half of her soul on the dance floor. Matteo. As if summoned by the thought, Chloe's phone buzzed with a new message notification. She looked at it, and her expression soured. "Speak of the devil," she muttered. "What is it?" Celestine asked. "It's him, Matteo Vargas," Chloe said, turning the phone to show Celestine the screen. It was a message request on a social media platform. The message read, "Celestine mi estrella. I saw the video. The world saw the video. That fire, it never went out. I knew it. We need to talk. I'm back in New York. Call me." Celestine felt a cold dread wash over her. Matteo, her partner since they were children. They had been a unit, a single entity destined for greatness. They had won junior championships, national titles. They were Vargas and Rossi, the rising stars of the international tango circuit. He was the one who had pushed her, perfected her, and ultimately broken her. The tragedy hadn't just been her father's sudden, devastating illness. It had been Matteo's reaction to it. When she'd told him she needed to step back to take time off from competing to care for her family and work to pay the bills, he had been furious. He'd called her weak, said she was throwing away their dream. His dream. He hadn't offered support. He'd delivered an ultimatum. The dance or her family. When she chose her family, he left. He took a new partner and moved to Europe without so much as a goodbye, leaving her to face her world crumbling alone. His abandonment had been a deeper cut than any financial hardship. "Don't you dare answer him," Chloe warned, seeing the conflicted look on Celestine's face. "He's an opportunist, is he? He saw you go viral, and now he's slithering back, thinking he can ride your coattails." "He was my partner for 15 years, Celestine said softly. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple," Chloe insisted. "He left you when you needed him most. Sebastian Sterling might be a world-class jerk, but at least he's a stranger. Matteo knew you, and he still walked away." Meanwhile, in his sterile, glass-walled office, Sebastian was reading the preliminary report from his investigator, Nicholas Frost. Frost was the best in the business. Discreet, thorough, and frighteningly efficient. Subject: Celestine Maria Rossi. Age 28. Last known address: Walk-up apartment, Queens. Employment history: waitress. The Serafina, 18 months. Prior to that, various service industry jobs. Family: Lorenzo Rossi. Father, 62. Former master carpenter. Suffered a debilitating stroke 3 years ago. Currently in long-term care at the Northwood Rehabilitation Center. Medical expenses: substantial insurance coverage minimal. Elena Rossi. Mother, deceased. Sebastian paused, a knot forming in his stomach. The mystery of why she was a waitress was beginning to resolve itself into a sad, simple story of financial desperation. But it was the next section that made him lean forward. Education/training. Full scholarship recipient, Astor Academy of the Performing Arts, AAPA. Dance. Major. Specialized in Argentinian tango. Attended from age 10 to 22. Considered a prodigy. Competitive history. Paired with Matteo Vargas. 3x U.S. National Junior Tango Champion. 2x North American professional exhibition champion, gold medalist 2018 World Tango. Championships Buenos Aires show tango division attached was a photo. It showed a younger Celestine, maybe 21 or 22, standing on a podium. Her face was radiant, flushed with victory. A heavy gold medal hung around her neck. Her arm was around a handsome, smirking young man, Mateo Vargas. They looked invincible. Note: Subject Rossi and partner Vargas abruptly dissolved their partnership 3 years ago, shortly after her father's medical incident. Vargas relocated to Europe with a new partner. Rossi dropped off the professional dance circuit entirely. No public performance is on record until the incident at the Serafina. Sebastian stared at the photo. The brilliant, joyful woman on that podium and the haunted, weary waitress he had tormented were the same person. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture not of a mystery, but of a tragedy. He had mocked a champion who had sacrificed her crown for her family. He had belittled a woman who had given up everything, and his careless cruelty had dragged her back into a spotlight she had clearly fled for a reason. His guilt, which had been a nagging discomfort, now became a crushing weight. His obsession with finding her was no longer about curiosity. It was about atonement. He picked up the file and looked at the address for the Northwood Rehabilitation Center. An idea began to form in his mind, an idea that went beyond a simple apology. An idea that was risky, that could be seen as intrusive, but that felt like the only right thing to do. He couldn't undo the humiliation he had caused, but maybe, just maybe, he could help restore the life she had been forced to leave behind. The Northwood Rehabilitation Center was a world away from the gleaming towers of Manhattan. It was a clean, quiet place, but it smelled of disinfectant and quiet desperation. Sebastian Sterling, dressed down in jeans and a simple grey sweater, felt profoundly out of place. He wasn't here as a mogul or a public figure. He was here as a man carrying a heavy debt of conscience. He had arranged the meeting through the center's administrator under the guise of being a potential philanthropic donor. In the small, sunlit recreation room, he found Lorenzo Rossi, sitting in a wheelchair, painstakingly trying to carve a small piece of wood with a specially adapted tool. He was a man with a kind, tired face and the powerful, gnarled hands of a craftsman, one of which was now mostly immobile. "Mr. Rossi." Sebastian began, his voice softer than usual. Lorenzo looked up, his eyes sharp and intelligent, despite his physical limitations. "You are the man from the television," he said, his speech slow but clear. "The one who made my Bella dance." Sebastian flinched. He hadn't expected to be recognized. "Yes. My name is Sebastian Sterling. I came here to—" "I know why you are here," Lorenzo interrupted. He set down his carving. "You feel guilty. You want to give us money to make it go away." The bluntness of the statement disarmed Sebastian completely. He had come with a carefully prepared speech, an offer to cover all of Lorenzo's past, present, and future medical expenses anonymously, if preferred. But Lorenzo had cut right through the pretense. "Yes," Sebastian admitted honestly. "I do feel guilty. What I did was inexcusable. And yes, I want to help. Your daughter, she shouldn't have to carry this burden." Lorenzo looked at his hands. "The burden is not the bills, Mr. Sterling. The burden is seeing the light go out of her eyes. For 3 years she has not been my Bella. She has been a ghost. She gave up her life, her soul, the dance for me. Every dollar she earns feels like a piece of her dream she has sold." He finally met Sebastian's gaze, and his eyes were filled with a father's fierce, heartbreaking love. "When I saw that video, for 3 minutes my Bella came back, The fire was there. You were cruel to her, yes, but you also woke her up. A strange gift from a terrible man. The words hit Sebastian harder than any insult. A terrible man. I want to fix what I broke, Sebastian said, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. Please, let me do this. Not for my conscience. For her. He slid an envelope across the table. It wasn't a check. It was a detailed proposal from the best neurological and physical therapy specialists in the country, a fully funded multi-year treatment plan, and a deed transferring ownership of a small, accessible house near the facility to the Rossi family, free and clear. It was a comprehensive, life-altering solution, not a simple payoff. Lorenzo looked at the papers, his eyes widening slightly. He was silent for a long time. This is not money, he said finally. This is a future. He looked up at Sebastian. She will not accept this from you. Her pride is all she has left. Then don't tell her it's from me, Sebastian pleaded. Tell her it's a new grant program, an anonymous benefactor, anything. Just let her be free to dance again. At that exact moment across town, Celestine was facing a ghost of her own. She had agreed to meet Matteo against Chloe's advice in a neutral location, a small coffee shop in her neighborhood. He looked different, older, harder. The easy charm had been replaced by a slick European polish. Celestine, he said, his voice a smooth baritone she had once found intoxicating. You look tired. I've been working, Matteo, she replied coolly. Exactly. Working. Serving coffee. It's a crime, he said, leaning forward. I saw the video. That passion. It's still there. It's ours. We were destined for greatness, you and I. I was a fool to leave. You didn't leave. You abandoned me, she corrected him, her voice steely. I was angry. Hurt you gave up on us, he argued, but this is our second chance. A gift from the gods of social media. Vargas and Rossi can be a global brand now. That idiot billionaire did us a favor. We can tour, teach judge competitions. We can have it all back, mi estrella. He reached across the table to take her hand, but she pulled it away. For years she had nursed the wound of his departure, sometimes even blaming herself. But seeing him now so eager to capitalize on her viral moment, she saw him clearly for the first time. He didn't love the dance. He loved the glory. He didn't miss her. He missed her talent. There is no us, Matteo, she said, her voice firm. That partnership is dead. You killed it when you walked away from me and my family. Don't be a fool, Celestine. He hissed, his charm evaporating. This is your only way back. No one else will have you. You've been out of the game for too long. You need me. No, she said, standing up, the realization hitting her with the force of a physical blow. I don't. I never did. She walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him stunned and furious. She had faced her past and had not flinched. For the first time in 3 years, she felt a flicker of her old self returning, not because of a dance, but because of a choice she had made for herself. Her liberation, however, was about to be complicated. As she returned to Chloe's apartment, her phone rang. It was Victoria Davenport. Celestine Rossi. The voice was cold and clipped. I think you and I need to have a conversation. It seems you've made quite an impression on my fiancé. Meet me at the plaza in an hour. Don't be late. The line went dead. Sebastian, meanwhile, was also facing an ultimatum. He returned to his penthouse to find Victoria waiting for him, her face like a thundercloud. My father called me, she said, her voice dangerously calm. He heard from the board of the Northwood Center that a Mr. Sterling was making inquiries. You went to see that waitress's father. It wasn't a question. Victoria, you had to what? Involve yourself further in this disgusting, humiliating mess, she exploded. It's all anyone is talking about. I have become a laughing stock. The woman whose fiancé was so captivated by a waitress's tango, he's now chasing her family around. This has nothing to do with you, Sebastian said flatly. This is about something I did. Something I'm trying to make right. Make right? She laughed, a brittle, ugly sound. Oh, Sebastian, you are so naive sometimes. You don't make things right with people like that. You write a check and you move on. You've lost your perspective. She walked toward him, her eyes hard as diamonds. So I'm going to make this very simple for you. You will cease all contact with this woman and her family. You will let your PR team handle it. You will go back to being the man I agreed to marry. All this engagement and the merger of the Sterling and Davenport empires that comes with it is over. Choose, her or me. Sebastian looked at her perfect hair, her flawless makeup, her cold, calculating eyes. He saw the world he had fought so hard to conquer, the acceptance he had craved. And then he thought of Celestine's fiery dance and her father's quiet dignity. He thought of the sacrifice, the passion, the authenticity. One world was built on power and appearances. The other was built on something real. His choice, he realized with shocking clarity, had already been made. The Palm Court at the Plaza Hotel was a monument to gilded elegance, a place designed to make anyone in a borrowed sweatshirt feel small. Celestine walked in her head held high. After her encounters with Matteo and her father's indirect awakening, her fear had been replaced by a quiet, resolute strength. Victoria was sitting at a secluded table, a picture of icy perfection. She didn't offer a greeting, simply gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Thank you for coming." Victoria began, her tone suggesting it was a royal summons. "I'll be direct. You've become an inconvenience." "I didn't ask for any of this," Celestine replied calmly. "And yet here we are." Victoria continued, stirring a cup of tea she had no intention of drinking. "Sebastian is impressionable. He has this misguided notion that he needs to atone for his behavior. He's sentimental, a flaw I am trying to correct. He seems to have developed a fixation on you." She slid a checkbook and a pen across the table. "So let's solve this. Write a number on this check. Any number. 6 figures, 7. Whatever it takes for you to disappear. Take a long vacation. Move to a new city. Go back to whatever life you had before you decided to ruin my evening." Celestine looked at the blank check, then back at Victoria's perfectly composed face. A week ago, a check like that would have been the answer to all her prayers. It would have meant her father's care, a life without constant crushing financial anxiety. But now it felt like an insult. Lorenzo's words echoed in her head. "The burden is not the bills." Slowly, Celestine pushed the checkbook back across the table. "My dignity isn't for sale, Miss Davenport," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "And for the record, your fiancé's behavior ruined my life long before it ruined your evening." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "You self-righteous little—" "I'm leaving," Celestine said, standing up. "I have nothing more to say to you." As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with Sebastian, who had just entered the Palm Court, his face grim. He had come looking for Victoria to end their engagement, only to find her attempting to buy Celestine's silence. "Victoria, that's enough," he said, his voice sharp with command. His eyes found Celestine's, and for the first time she saw not arrogance or pity but genuine, profound remorse. "Celestine, I am so sorry. For everything. Your apology is about 3 days and 1,000,000 YouTube views too late," she said, though the anger in her voice was tempered by a weary sadness. "I know," he said. "Words are useless. That's why I went to see your father." Celestine's blood ran cold. "You what? How dare you bring him into this?" "I had to," Sebastian insisted, stepping closer. "I had to understand, and I had to do something real, not just for me, for him, for you." Before she could protest further, Celestine's phone rang. It was the administrator from her father's care center, her voice bubbling with excitement. "Celestine, you won't believe it. An anonymous arts foundation just awarded your father their first ever legacy grant. It covers everything, all his outstanding bills, a full intensive therapy program with the best specialists, and they've even arranged for a trust to cover his living expenses. He can finally leave Northwood. He's free. Celestine, you're free." Celestine listened, stunned into silence. The phone pressed hard against her ear. She looked at Sebastian, understanding dawning on her face. It wasn't a payoff. It wasn't a bribe. It was a key to the cage she had been in for 3 long years. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness or anger, but of overwhelming, complicated relief. Victoria, seeing the entire exchange, stood up, her face a mask of cold fury. "I see," she said icily to Sebastian. "You've made your choice. You'd rather throw your fortune away on this charity case than build an empire with me. You are a fool, Sebastian." "No," Sebastian said, his eyes never leaving Celestine's tear-streaked face. "For the first time in a very long time, I'm not." The Victoria stormed out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and shattered ambitions in her wake. An awkward, heavy silence fell between Celestine and Sebastian. The grand setting of the plaza seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them. "You shouldn't have," Celestine whispered, finally finding her voice. "Yes, I should have," he countered gently. "It's the only thing I've done in the past week that I'm not ashamed of. I can't take back what I did, how I treated you. But I can give you back the time you sacrificed. I can give you back the chance to just be a dancer." He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't ask for a date. He didn't make another ridiculous proposal. He simply stood there, offering her a future with no strings attached. A few weeks later, Celestine stood in a vast, sun-drenched dance studio. She wasn't an instructor. She was the owner. The Rossi Foundation for the Performing Arts, funded by an anonymous tech grant, had been established to provide scholarships and opportunities for young dancers from low-income families. Her father, now in a state-of-the-art outpatient program, spent his afternoons in a workshop attached to the studio carving beautiful wooden trophies for the Foundation's future competitions. The door opened, and Sebastian walked in, looking hesitant. He hadn't contacted her since that day at the plaza, giving her space. "The place looks amazing," he said quietly. "Thank you. For all of it," she replied, her sincerity clear. "I don't know how to repay you." "I do," he said, a hopeful, nervous energy about him. "Don't repay me. Teach me." She looked at him confused. "Teach you what? How to dance?" he said, his gaze direct and stripped of all its former arrogance. "Properly, this time. Not the showpiece. Not the performance. I don't want to learn the tango you dance for an audience. I want to learn the one you dance for yourself. I want to learn your language." It was the most honest, humble thing he had ever said. It wasn't a challenge or a proposition. It was a request for connection. Celestine looked at this man, who had in the course of a few weeks been her tormentor, her unwilling partner, and her unlikely liberator. She saw the change in him, the hard edges softened by a newfound humility. A slow smile spread across her face. She walked to the sound system and put on a piece of music. It wasn't the fiery, dramatic La Comparsita. It was a slow, melodic tango, full of quiet longing and the promise of a new beginning. She turned and held out her hand. "The first lesson is free," she said, "but this time, Mr. Sterling, you follow my lead." He took her hand, and as they stepped onto the polished floor, it wasn't a battle or a performance. It was a conversation, a quiet, unrehearsed duet between two people from different worlds, finding a new rhythm together. And so a story that began with a cruel taunt ended with a quiet lesson. It wasn't a fairy tale wedding, but something far more real, a partnership built not on a mocking proposal, but on a genuine plea for understanding. Sebastian and Celestine's journey shows us that true strength isn't about power or wealth, but about the courage to admit when you're wrong and the grace to forgive. It reminds us that dignity is not for sale, and that incredible talent can be found in the most unexpected places, just waiting for the right music to play. What did you think of Celestine's incredible comeback? Was Sebastian's grand gesture enough to atone for his actions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you were moved by this story of redemption and unexpected connection, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a powerful story, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales that will touch your heart. Thank you for listening.